Hi, I'm Gregory, and I wanted to share with you how you can grow these wonderful avocados here in Northern California. Um, I've been studying and doing a deep dive in avocados for the last 10 years. When I first started working in Napa, somebody gave me a wonderful black skin avocado with edible skin, and it was the most amazing flavor. And I realized, oh, I've had these before in southern Mexico, and I had no idea you can grow these up here. Ever since then, I've been doing a deep dive. I'll go to Southern California, the San Diego area, visit orchards, talk to farmers from the US, from Mexico. I have friends involved in the California rare fruit growers, and I try to learn all I can. I also read the literature in Southern California about avocados. Yet, I also come to realize that in Northern California, we have different conditions, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. But because we do have a long history of growing avocados in Northern California. I've seen trees well over 100 years old in Napa, the Sacramento area. There are trees in Modesto, obviously Monterey County, San Francisco, Oakland, very old trees. Some are seedlings, very unique, wonderful varieties. And some of them were planted 50 years ago. And one example is in Concord. There's a lawn, and they have a Hass and they have a Bacon. And these two trees have a tremendous amount of fruit. And these people, they're so lucky they get to share these fruit with all their friends and neighbors. So how can we do that? How can we get to the point where we can have heavy producing avocados growing right in our yard? Because really, avocados, they are natural to the environment in California. The only problem is getting it to where it's a big and strong tree. And that's where the challenge is. So I did a deep dive, and I wanted to share what works for me. The house in Concord, they don't water the trees other than the sprinklers, and they don't fertilize, and they still get a lot of production. So I want to start by saying you don't need to buy fertilizer. In fact, a farmer from Mexico who grew avocados there told me that one bag of fertilizer for one tree should last for years. So I want to start by saying you don't need to fertilize. For years I didn't fertilize, and I had good trees, healthy trees. They grew a little slow, but they got to where they needed to be. Yeah, now I do add some fertilizer because where I lived, it was a peach and apricot orchard. So these are things that I use to help me, and perhaps it'll help you. I use Dr. Earth's fruit tree fertilizer. It is not a strong fertilizer, and it's basically made of stuff that you would use in your garden to get good results, and it does very well. It's one that you can usually find anywhere, and I'm sure you'll be very happy with it. If you want something stronger, for example, you have a young tree and you want to see more growth, because, for example, oftentimes you'll plant a tree and you don't fertilize, and the first year it does wonderfully, beautifully. Then the second year, nothing happens. What went wrong? Well, that's because the nurseries, the commercial nurseries, they put heavy, strong fertilizer in it, and the tree took off. And then once that fertilizer is depleted, the tree just sits there. Now then, following year, it'll probably do well. Once the roots release into the native soil, it will grow. I've seen this myself a few times. If you want to help that along, I recommend the Lily Miller. They have several fertilizers. This is obviously going to be the one for us. The citrus and avocado food. Lily Miller. Speaking of citrus, palm, cactus, and citrus mix is what I use when I put them in pots or in the ground. So I recommend, if you're going to plant an avocado tree, dig a hole, about a meter by meter, a yard by yard, in 2 feet deep, and remove the clay, or at least break up the clay and mix in the cactus and citrus mix. Because I can tell you, avocados, they love sand. And if you go to Fallbrook in Southern California, you see the wind, you'll see sand and dust blowing everywhere. Avocados love that because when it's warm, it can easily extend its roots. And you can't go wrong with that one. And if you wanted to grow avocados in extreme temperatures like we have, I use this mix. I'll put a small avocado tree in a 15-gallon and let it sit in that one. Let it sit in that pot. And then once the small avocado from a 5-gallon to 15-gallon gets big, then maybe you want to consider putting it in the ground the following spring. And that's what I would do if I lived in some place where it's very cold. I live in East Contra Costa County and Brentwood on the Delta. Here we don't have too many problems with cold, but if you live somewhere in Northern California where you saw snow here in 2023, you'll probably want to do something like that, where you can let it get a little bigger so it'll survive if we have another very cold, wet winter. And here where I am inland, what I have to worry about is extreme heat. So this is where the next product comes in. The 3-in-1 Plant Guard, IV Organics. I use this to whitewash the trunk to help it in case there's a sunburn. Because the trees, when they're young and in the beginning, they will get stressed. That's also why I recommend planting in the spring. So February, March, I would put them in the ground so they have a chance to adjust before the extreme heat and then the extreme winter. That is also the perfect time to fertilize, and really the only time I feel the need to fertilize. I'm not too interested in fertilizing more than I need to. It's just something I do to help them a little bit. Now getting back to extreme temperatures, whether it's extreme cold or extreme heat, you can plant an avocado near a structure, near a house, because that is going to protect it from the extremes in general. I have 3 Guatemalan types. They're only 12 feet. They're by my house, and that protects them from the extreme stress of the sun. And if it gets cold, they're warmer there. So they do like that, because if you read the literature, they always talk about full sun. I imagine they probably would produce more fruit, but they already produce a lot of fruit. So being that our yards are smaller, you got to work with what you have. So I'm very happy that I figured that out, that, oh, if I put it next to the house, they get protection. And obviously the ground stays wetter. It's just a good situation all the way around. Also, when I say 12 feet, you have to keep in mind that some avocados want to take off to 20 or 30 feet. I had a reed on the side of the house. Unfortunately, I had to move it because every year it would shoot up to 20 feet and I have to cut it in half. And I started losing all the fruit. I realized it was just the wrong spot, so I moved it. So always study the growth habit of your avocados. You can keep them small. Obviously, if it's a bigger tree, you're going to have to prune every year. If it's a smaller tree, then you could prune like every 2 or 3 years. And usually I prune in the winter, and I'll take off maybe 1 or 2 limbs. And that way in the spring it can grow back and be ready in the summer. So it's not too open, because you want to keep the canopy so you don't get too much sunburn, because these are sensitive trees. And I want to talk about A and B varieties as well, because yes, you can have an A variety and it'll grow well, it'll do well. But the truth is, with so many good tasting B varieties, why not? Just like I said, the house in Concord had an A Hass, a B Bacon, and they produced a ton of fruit. If you go to that house and you know them, they'll give you a big bag of fruit and you'll have 2 dozen avocados just for saying hello. And so why not? If you want production, then I would get an A and B type. And I mentioned production because to me, with all the work that goes into growing avocados, I aim for the high producing varieties. Because why would you want to grow all these avocados and have to continue to buy them from the store? And it's like, why not grow lots of avocados and be able to share them with people? That's the way to go. So I have a list of varieties I would like to share with you that I've personally seen do well, or talk to people who know them or have them who I trust and know, and they have seen them do well. And the first one is these are more like Hass tasting varieties. If you want a Hass tasting variety, I would go for one of these. The trees are smaller, they're heavy producers, and being that Hass is 90% of the avocado trees in California already, why not grow something slightly different? For example, this Pinkerton, if it's left to hang all the way to the summer up here, it'll turn dark and it'll pretty much taste just like a Hass, especially if you mix it with other food. Along with Pinkerton, lamb is also a Hass-related variety. It's a big pear-shaped fruit, and it's wonderful for guacamole. One of those, and you have a big bowl of guacamole. There's also jam, which is a small, very Hass-like type of tree. That's a heavy producer. And Carmen is also pretty much just like a Hass, and it has a crazy production. It's a very heavy producer. You can't go wrong with any of those four, and they all thrive here in Northern California. There's also Mexicola Grande, which are Mexican race avocados. It's got a black skin you can eat. They are wonderful. And there's also a Little Cotto or Wurtz, which you often see in the stores, and that's a small compact tree. But this one, you want to grow more inland because it seems to like the heat. And another inland avocado is Fuerte, which is the classic before Hass. It is also an inland avocado. I've seen it do well in Fairfield, Fremont, Union City, Concord. I'm growing one in Brentwood. And this one also does well, as well as Surprise. There's a beautiful Surprise in Modesto. That's a heavy producer. So inland, those two, Fuerte, Surprise, and also Wurtz, can do well in inland. As in cold climates, San Francisco, the Peninsula, Marin County, the hills or the mountains, I probably wouldn't grow them because they seem to like more of the warm nights. And for bee varieties, there's Zutano, Bacon, and Jim Bacon, all reliable, all will produce every year, heavy crops. You can't go wrong with these. So hopefully this was helpful for you, and we could get a discussion and share our ideas and topics, and tell me what you're growing, because we have a lot of different areas and microclimates in the Bay Area, and you might find a variety that's unique to your area, and you might try different varieties that you pick up in Southern California or elsewhere and see how it goes. You'll be a fruit experimenter. I have seen many wonderful types of avocados, and one of the things I do is I go onto Craigslist or social media, and I'll find someone selling avocados, and I'll go visit them and I'll talk to them. I'll find out about the trees and the history. I'll try out the fruit. And now, after years and years of trying, maybe 1,000 times, I finally figured out I know how to graft. And I'm mentioning this because if you have gotten this far on the video, you're probably interested in propagating and grafting too. So I'll share a secret with you I figured out. I found a tree in Lafayette. I called it La Marinda, and it basically taught me how to graft. It was my first successful grafts. And from that, I also figured out that I can graft that one most of the year, but the Guatemalan types, I have to graft in the spring, February, March, April. So that is the time of year for grafting. So hopefully that's helpful for you. And thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day. Please leave any questions or comments. Let's get a community together so we can share Northern California avocado growing, because our information comes from Southern California. If you're watching this in Southern California, thank you. We appreciate all you've done, and all your research. And it's very useful. But for us in Northern California, we have to compare notes with each other because our conditions are different, our situations are different, the varieties that thrive up here are different. In fact, if you know of another good variety that does very well in Northern California, please leave it in the comments. I'm always willing to learn, and hopefully one day we can exchange fruit, exchange budwood, exchange trees, or just exchange information. Thanks for watching.